Welcome to I-24 News Defense, a look inside strategic affairs, security, intel, and more in cooperation with Israel Defense Magazine. This week, is there a connection between the terror attacks in Jerusalem and global movements of radical Islam? We'll also hear about a simulation exercise mapping out the results of a bad nuclear deal with Iran. Let's begin.
حركة الجهاد الإسلامي تبارك هذه العمليات البطولية وتعتبرها في إطار الرد الطبيعي باسم كل الشعب الفلسطيني على ما ترتكب إسرائيل من جرائم.
الانتفاضة لا تستأذن أحد.
من حقهم أن يدافعوا عن أنفسهم وأن ידאפעו عن مقدساتهم.
אנחנו לא ניתן להסלמה הזאת להתפתח לנוכח פוטנציאל של פיגועי דריסה או של סכינאות.
And we begin now with journalist Ben-Dror Yamini joining me in the studio. Thanks very much for being with me. So we've been talking a lot about the escalation in Jerusalem and the West Bank. Alongside it, a lot about, of course, the Islamic State, the spread in the Middle East. You wrote a piece this week about the concept of global intifada. Do you suggest, is your premise that there's actually a link between the two?
Oh, yes, of course, because we can see what happened in the last month in some other places like Canada, hit and run attack. Somewhere in Quebec, attack in the parliament in Ottawa, what happened in London just a week ago that 4 militants were arrested because they plotted to kill the Queen with knives, and what happened in Manhattan some days before, and a lot of other things which are taking place all over the world. Nothing to do with Israel, nothing to do with occupation, nothing to do with provocations. So we are facing something new, and yes, it is under the influence of the radical Islam, global jihad, and the Islamic State all together. I mean, there is a new wave of radicalism which we can see not only in Israel, but in some other places just as well.
So the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is by no means new, of course. Are you suggesting then that the rise of the Islamic State group, the popularity, is in effect inciting the violence here, is fueling
in a way,
the conflict?
Yes, in a way, yes. It's not because of what's happening in Israel, nothing to do with. It's something which is happening in a lot of places. And look what's happening not only in the West, because we always have to bear in mind something which is highly important. 99% more, but 99% at least of the victims, of the casualties of the global jihad are Muslims, not Zionists, not Jews, not Americans, not Canadians, not Europeans. We are speaking, I mean, who is killed just some days ago? 64 children in the Nigerian school. They were just massacred.
Bringing it, though, to local, so to speak, where we are here in Israel, can you say then that the occupation is disconnected from it? Because whether we like to admit it or not, the situation between Israelis and Palestinians is quite different, is particular.
Look, we can have any political view in favor of the occupation, against it, as I am for myself, but without any kind of political affiliation, we have to understand the global reality. That's what I'm saying. So it's fair enough to be against or in favor of Judea and Samaria or settlements, yes or not. But it has nothing to do with the global jihad, which is rising right now, which is emerging more and more. Not that we did not have it a year ago or 2 years ago, but because of IS, because of ISIS, because of the Islamic State, things are happening in the world, not only here, not only in Jerusalem, not only in Kfar Kana, Kana village. Things are happening in the world.
So if that's the case, what does that say about finding the solution? If the Israeli government is looking at how to deal with Hamas or how to deal with Fatah in the West Bank.
Okay. It's a very good question. It's a very good question because we have to look at reality. And for myself, as a veteran supporter of two-state solution and Clinton plan, and we have all to think. We have all to rethink. I mean, because we don't know what's going to happen next week. Things are happening in the Middle East. We have to look and see carefully. I mean, what Israel can allow itself to do right now. Whatever my opinion was a month ago, or 2 months ago, or 3 months ago, we all have to reconsider ourselves because of the new realities that are created now on the ground.
Ben-Dror Amini, that's all the time we have for, but certainly a very important point to end on, that in the Middle East especially, there's always something behind the reality on the ground. We have to look at that. Thanks very much for being with me.
Thank you.
Moving on, less than 2 weeks, that's the deadline for Western powers and Iran to reach an agreement on Tehran's nuclear program. But judging by the latest talks in Oman and diplomatic leaks following them, it doesn't look good.
The discussions have been tough, direct, and serious.
Although the talks with Iran are being held under total secrecy, it seems the parties are going one step forward and two back.
No conversation, no agreement, no exchange, nothing has created any kind of deal or agreement.
According to several publications, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry arrived in Oman with a draft of a final agreement, but nonetheless, no great progress was made.
And I agree with Laurent. They have a right to a peaceful program, but not a track to a bomb.
U.S. President Barack Obama suffered a stinging defeat in the U.S. congressional midterm election earlier this month, and has also been forced to realize that the war against IS does not indeed require deploying large forces on the ground. This has led to speculation that the president is eager to reach a quick agreement with Iran to restore his international status and help him in the war against the jihadists. The Wall Street Journal reported this week that Obama sent a letter to the president of Iran saying he wanted to discuss commercial ties with the Islamic Republic, the first between the two countries in 35 years. Russia and President Putin did not stand aside and have reached an agreement to build 8 new nuclear reactors in Iran.
See, the worst thing that can happen now is for the international community to agree to a deal that leaves Iran as a threshold nuclear power and removes the sanctions. That would be a disaster of historic proportions.
All of these events leave Israel and the Gulf states worried at the possibility of bad agreement with Iran, one which would allow Tehran to reach nuclear weapon capability within a short period of time.
And joining me now in the studio is Azrael Bermant, a research fellow at the Institute for National Security Studies, specializing in nuclear weapons proliferation. Thanks very much for being with me.
Pleasure.
So you recently concluded a simulation exercise looking at the possible consequences of a bad deal, something Benjamin Netanyahu, we just saw in this report, has spoken of a lot. First of all, what do you consider a bad deal with Iran?
A bad deal will be one which would have so many loopholes and ambiguities that it would be very easy for Iran to claim that it's acting in good faith, but still there'd be the danger that it could break out to nuclear capability within a short period of time, perhaps 4 months, 5 months.
So looking after the simulation, what were the results? What were the possible outcomes of such a deal with Iran?
Well, Israel was very concerned for a number of reasons. There was, first of all, the concern was that Iran's low enriched uranium stockpile was left pretty much untouched. The issue of the centrifuges were not dismantled. Iran's weaponization work was not challenged in any way. Iran hadn't come clean on that. There's also the concern over the Iraq, the heavy water reactor, and the fact that was effectively left untouched. And then there's also the concern over the expiry of the agreement, the so-called sunset clause, how long this would last for.
Right. So let's talk about Russia for a moment. Russia recently, this week, news that Russia signed a deal with Iran to construct a few more nuclear reactors, up to 6 in Iran. Your simulations show that Russia would not benefit from a deal, is that correct?
Well, Russia has very complex interest in the region. I think Russia is the problem from Russia's point of view is, at least in the simulation, was that Russia, if Iran, the agreement would enable Iran to come out of isolation and Russia would therefore lose its influence over Iran. That's one issue. And the second thing was that Russia would possibly lose its monopoly over energy supplies in Europe. So from that point of view, Russia saw it as a problematic agreement.
Looking for a moment at the big picture of your results, Benjamin Netanyahu has very frequently said throughout the negotiations that no deal is better than a bad deal. Now that you've done the simulation, do you agree?
Well, I mean, it really depends on what sort of agreement is reached, and the simulation, as we saw through the simulation, and of course, remember it was only a simulation exercise. We're not saying this is definitely what's going to happen, but the simulation exercise.
But it helps judge in the real world a little bit better the theoretical agreement.
The great thing about this exercise, it shows you how easily what could on the face of it look like a good agreement is not necessarily a good agreement if certain things aren't resolved. For example, inspections, that has to be very rigorous.
This is what, on this line, in the very short time we have left, this is what I wanted to touch on. What are the recommendations you would give? Inspections, what else?
We would say, for example, that the issue, for example, of the Arak heavy water reactor, that would have to be, if not completely dismantled, the core would have to be replaced in such a way that Iran wouldn't be able to extract plutonium from it. There's the issue of the centrifuges and the fact that Iran would not be able to keep, perhaps the symbolic number of centrifuges, but not what the
Certainly a lot of elements here, a very complex deal. In less than 2 weeks, perhaps we'll see what can be relevant from your simulation.
Yeah.
We'll see. Mr. Azrael Berman, thanks very much for being with us. And we end this edition with a bit of tech. Securing borders is a need of almost every country. As an AP investigation revealed this week already, the U.S. government patrols nearly half of the Mexican border with drones. Now one Israeli company is working on the next frontier with robots. More in a report from Tal Shalev.
In the past decade, Israel has been surrounding itself with barriers, north, south, and east. A ring of sophisticated fences protect and defend the country from terrorist and criminal threats, as well as illegal immigration. But keeping track of borders and fences can be a tiring job and demands unique and creative solutions. Meet RoboGuard, a surveillance robot that replaces humans in securing border fences and scans and searches for perimeter anomalies such as fence holes, nearby suspicious objects, or infiltration attempts.
Nobody can stand and watch cameras for around the clock. Even if they have automatic detection, there are too many false alarms. In many cases, the camera is too far from the event. Even if it's 100 meters, sometimes there's something obscuring. There could be a bush or some grass. And in order to really verify whether something is starting to happen, you need to be very close to it. The advantage of the robot that it stands 1, 2, 3 meters from the intrusion place, which means that it cannot miss anything. You can see with the camera almost like you're standing there. And also it is not obscured by fog or rain or snow.
RoboGuard, launched this year by the Israeli Magal Security Systems, uses a rail to quickly move along the fence, equipped with a camera, sensors, laser scanners, and more.
We incorporated all the different sensors into one system, command and control system, in which you can get the picture, video, as well as signals coming from all over the site. Whether it's the perimeter, whether it's the access control system, which we have in each and every gate.
The robot runs routine patrol inspections of the fence line. When an alarm is received, it turns the camera on, warns whoever is attempting to break in, and even sprays them with tear gas.
The robot has actually two missions. One of them is to react immediately in case of an alert and approach the vicinity of the intrusion within 2-3 meters, and then it can look very closely on the site and on the place and see whether there is preparation for intrusion, whether it's just a nuisance, maybe a boy playing with a ball and just hitting the fence, or whether it's a real intrusion.
A single robot typically covers 500 to 1,000 meters, depending on the required response time, with a docking station in between two robots, servicing them both with battery recharging and wireless communication.
Theoretically, one robot can cover 10 kilometers, but then of course your response time is compromised, and your scanning frequency is a little bit slower.
RoboGuard's main purpose is to protect critical sites like airports, seaports, military bases, and prisons. But don't worry, humans cannot be replaced entirely. Not just yet.
It doesn't replace 100% people, because if there is real events, somebody needs to come and maybe even shoot in some cases. But it can do almost up to the point of shooting.
So humans are not obsolete, but almost. That's it for us on this edition of I-24 News Defense. Find us here next week in the Jaffa Port, as every week. Catch us then.